Good morning. My apologies yet again for the text to speech. Closed captions are available if you have trouble understanding it. Now, onto the video. Today I'll be talking about shading. I personally love to do it, but I know not everyone has an easy time with it, and I've had friends ask me how I go about it. So I'll be talking through my own process in this video. This will be a mix of beginner and intermediate advice. Honestly, I think anyone can benefit from seeing someone else's process, but there's definitely some more beginner-friendly tips here too. Also, sorry about the makeshift sprites in this and my hair video. I'm working on some better ones. You'll see them soon. Possibly even in a speed paint. Anyways, onto the tutorial. I usually think about the sort of shading I'll be doing as part of the planning of the illustration. You don't need to plan exactly what you're doing, but maybe think about intense shading, or warm shading, or if you want to invoke a certain mood, etc. Keeping this in mind throughout the drawing process can help, particularly with posing and colors. Now that I have a base drawing done, here comes the fun part for me. But first, I'd like to talk about the tools. For brushes, I mostly use a basic hard pen, an airbrush, and a more painterly style brush, though your choice of brush is all down to personal preference. I would like to mention a common mistake I see, however. Some artists will exclusively use the airbrush tool for shading. While you can take a lot of liberties with stylistic choice, this one is often closer to a mistake. Let me explain. In real life, yes, there are very soft shadows, but there's a mix of hard ones as well. The softness of a shadow often depends on how curved the surface is, how far away it is from the object casting the shadow, and how much it's facing the light source. It's a bit hard to explain, but I hope that at least makes some sense. Only using soft shadows looks unnatural and allows you less detail. You need to use hard shadows too, unless you're going for a specific effect, or you could use only hard shading. This can work very well, and is usually a lot faster to draw. I personally use a mix, but you can do what you want. I'd just recommend trying to get an understanding of how light is cast in real life. Yes, we're not going for a perfectly realistic style, but a very, very important concept in art is to learn the rules before you break them. That applies to shading too. There's one last thing I'd like to talk about before we get into my process. Layer styles. If you don't know what layer styles are, they are a mode you can set a layer to in order to get a certain effect. For example, instead of using a dark color on low opacity to add shadows here, I can use a brighter color on a multiply layer. It has a much nicer, much easier effect. I know the long list of layer styles can seem daunting, but I really only use 3. Multiply for shadows, overlay for effects and adding color, and screen for lighting. Other programs may have equivalent styles like luminosity. Moving on. For our first example, I'll be doing some fairly basic, minimal shading. Our light source is going to be vaguely above her and to the right, so I'll be adding shadows where the light would be blocked. Under the chin is a common spot. I like to use a red, blue, or more commonly a purple color to shade. I'll set a layer to multiply. Pick a color, mess with the saturation a little, and dive in. With this minimal style, we don't need to do a whole lot. It's just to add a little bit of depth. The highlights are very minimal as well, just to add shine to a few places to establish a bit of texture. Remember to have a light source in mind. It's less vital when there's barely any shadow, but it's still very important for lighting. Secondly, I'm going to be doing some more dramatic shading. This time it's more important for me to know where my light source is, and to add more detail. It's also very important to think about the character as a 3D shape. It helps a lot to place the shadows. With more complicated lighting, I also like to use an airbrush on the darker part of the character to add some more shadow. In this drawing I added some darker secondary shadows too, and I also take this opportunity to do a little more with the light side. Next, I'm going to go ham and have some fun. I do something similar to the second example at first. but I go a bit more bold with the colors. Also, feel free to experiment with unfamiliar techniques or things you've seen other artists do. For example, here I used an airbrush eraser to lighten the first layer of shading on the lighter side of the character. It was an effect vaguely inspired by Vivziepop. I also do a lot more blurring and soft shading in this more complicated illustration. I'd done this a little in previous examples, but here I use it more extensively. I also use the airbrush to create soft light on her right side, similar to what I did with the darkest shadow on the second example. An important part of what made this drawing interesting in my opinion was the second light source. I added a red light on her lower left to add a bit of contrast and more color. The last thing I did here, another very important step, was the overlay layer. You'll see how I added bright colors to different parts of the illustration. I turned down the opacity a lot, but it's still a lovely effect that I use quite often, and it can be a lot more subtle than I made it here. I'd really recommend playing around with overlay layers in your own art. This drawing ended up as my favorite one of the video. This next example is an attempt at a strong, singular light source, similar to a theatrical spotlight. I used more desaturated, moody colors than in the previous illustration to get a different effect. Colors are very important in shading, and if you have an understanding of color theory, it can help you a lot when trying to achieve certain effects. I also used a lot of techniques I've already talked about earlier in this video, but I'd like to mention the rim lighting at the top. I gave a strong yellow outline on a screen layer mode. This is something you can use when you have a strong light source. Or hell, even when you don't. A lot of the things I'm talking about are down to stylistic choice. For example, ABD illustrates experiments with rim lighting often for some very lovely, stylized effects. I'd suggest messing around with other art styles. This can help you learn and grow as an artist. Lastly, I'm going to attempt some strong, red lighting coming from underneath. I struggled with this a bit more, but I wanted to show the experiment anyways. Really, the main point of this video is that you should experiment and learn lots of different techniques. It can really help you out. And again, trying out shading styles by other artists can be very insightful. Don't be afraid to go for bold, complicated shading either. It can really level up your artwork, and it can do a lot for the mood of a piece or scene. Go for it. It can be a lot of fun. Now that I've shown you my process, go forth and explore your own. I hope you found this video helpful. Thanks for sticking around, and have a nice day.